Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We are learning Mishna Kiddushin, Parak Dalet, Chapter 4, Mishnah Gimel, Mishnah 3. Kol ha'asirin lavai bekahal mutarim lavai zeh bazeh. Whoever is forbidden to enter lavai bekahal literally means to enter the congregation of the Jewish people, which is a term the Torah uses to say that they cannot marry, ordinary Jews. Mutarim lavai zeh bazeh are permitted to marry each other. Now, Mishnah Aleph had mentioned already before, made a list of those people that are disqualified from marrying ordinary Jews that can marry each other. But it made a list. It said, the one that could marry, the exception to that rule are the Gerim, the converts, but it mentioned the Mamzer, the Nasin, the Shtuki. It made a list, and it said they're allowed to marry each other. The beginning of the Mishnah there said they cannot marry to ordinary Jews, and then it has the list of those that could marry. In this Mishnah, the Mishnah pretty much says the same thing, but the fact that it phrased it in a way of all that are forbidden to enter the congregation are permitted to marry each other means to add something more to it, because the ones that are meant, again, besides for the Gerim besides for the Gerim who are permissible to enter the congregation, who the first opinion of the Mishnah over there said would be able to marry these disqualified people, but the other ones that are mentioned are not allowed to marry ordinary Jews. Here, it's coming to add another group of people that cannot marry into the Jewish people, and therefore they may marry the Mamzer, they may marry the Nasin, the Shtuki, the Asufi, and they're coming to include converts from the nations of Ammon and Moab. The Torah says that a convert, L'yavai Amayne Me'avi B'Kahal Hashem, an Ammonite, a Moabite, when referring to a convert, may not enter into the congregation of the Jewish people. That means a male. We know that this is specifically done by a male convert from Ammon and Moab, not a female, may not marry into the congregation, because they may not marry ordinary Jews. So they were not listed in the previous Mishnah. This is what this Mishnah is coming to include. Anybody that may not enter the congregation includes the Ammonite and Moabite male converts. They may not enter the congregation. They may not marry an ordinary Jew. They may marry a mamzer, an asin, all the disqualified ones mentioned before. Rabbi Yehuda Oiser, Rabbi Yehuda forbids. Now, this statement of Rabbi Yehuda is not so clear. What do you mean he forbids? He forbids people who cannot enter the congregation to marry a mamzer? That's not what it means. What it means is like this. Rabbi Yehuda is actually of the opinion that as we had, do we have it yet? No. Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that, and this is based on the Gemara, that actually a ger, a convert, may not marry a mamzer. He argues on the previous Mishnah. Previous Mishnah said a ger may marry a mamzer. Rabbi Yehuda says a ger may not marry a mamzer. Not allowed to. He's allowed to enter the congregation. A ger, say they marry a regular Jew, so they cannot go ahead and marry a mamzer or a mamzeres or an asin, etc. Okay, they can't. That's what he holds. But the point here is, but even Rabbi Yehuda agrees that the ger Ammoni and Moavi, they're gerim, but since they can't marry into the congregation, those are gerim that can't marry an ordinary Jew, they can marry the mamzer and the mamzeres, etc. So when the Mishnah says Rabbi Yehuda Oiser, he forbids, Rabbi Yehuda Oiser means he forbids a ger to marry mamzeres. That he forbids. He can't. A ger is allowed to marry. A ger is allowed to enter the kahal, and therefore he cannot marry mamzeres. Tanakama has his sources to learn otherwise. So the point is, though, let me read to you from the way the notes have it. Unlike the Tana of Mishnah 1, who stated that converts may marry mamzerim, nesinim, shsukim, asufim, Rabbi Yehuda forbids converts to marry any of these people. However, Rabbi Yehuda holds the male converts from Ammon and Moab are different, since the Torah prohibits Ammonites and Moabites to marry regular Jews. They are similar to mamzerim, who are also forbidden to marry regular Jews. It is thus permitted for these two groups to intermarry. So the way to read the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda forbids means he forbids a ger who can marry into the Jewish people. He forbids them to marry any of those disqualified people. But a ger Ammon Me'avi, a male Ammonite and Moabite convert, they who cannot marry into a regular Jew, they could marry disqualified people. Now, Rebbe Lezer says, V'adon b'vadon mutter. Someone that is certain, someone who is definitely forbidden to marry regular Jews, like a person who's definitely a mamzer, who's definitely in a sin. So those kinds of people, vadon v'vadoyin, those that are definitely forbidden to marry into the congregation, they can marry others like them. A mamzer can marry a mamzeres, a mamzer can marry in a sin. Okay. However, at the same time, vadoyin b'sveikan. Utzveikim b'vadon, a vadai, meaning a definite, let's say a definite mamzer, with someone that it's a question whether they're a mamzer, meaning let's say the male is definitely a mamzer, the female is not. She's not certain. She's a shasuki. She's an asufi. She's the ones that we have a doubt as to whether they're mamzerim or not. Utzveikim b'vadon. Or let's say the male is the doubtful one, he's the shtuki, he's the asufi, and the woman is the vadai. She's a certain mamzer. Usveikan besveikan, or let's say a doubtful one and a doubtful one, meaning somebody both of them are doubt. There's a doubt about them whether they are mamzerim or not. In all these cases, the halacha is asur. They are forbidden. Why are they forbidden in all these cases? Because Rebbe Lezer argues again, unlike the Tanakama. The previous Mishnah actually said a mamzer can marry a shasuki. A mamzer can marry someone that there is a doubt whether he's a mamzer or not. It could be he's not, right? In the case of the shasuki and the asufi, we don't know what they are. We don't know what they are because we don't know the parents. So that means we don't have enough. We don't have information. But the truth could very well be that they're 100% fine. Maybe the parents were not mamzerim. The father wasn't a mamzer. They could actually be perfectly fine. And therefore, coming from that argument, Rebbe Lezer says a suffix, right, the suffix has a problem. The suffix can't marry a mamzer because maybe they're not a mamzer. The suffix cannot marry another suffix because maybe the other suffix is the mamzer and you're not the mamzer. So in those situations, Rebbe Lezer says they can't marry. Now, the question then is, all right, who are they going to marry then? Who are they going to marry? They can't marry anybody? These people, these fakists, they can't marry anyone? So they bring down here, I believe, right? Right. They bring down here on the bottom, they bring down that, thus, according to Rebbe Lezer, a shasuki or a sufi may marry only a convert, because converts are permitted to marry both ordinary Jews and mamzerim. Meaning Rebbe Lezer follows the Tanakama's opinion in as much that a ger can marry a mamzer. So therefore, any of these people that we have a question whether mamzerim or not can marry a ger. Because whoever they are, the ger can marry them. The problem is, though, but let's say you're not talking about the ger, you're talking about a mamzer, vade, a definite mamzer, marrying one of these doubtful ones. There, the Tanakama said he has the sources to learn that actually a mamzer can marry a suffix mamzer. Rebbe Lezer says he disagrees with that source, and therefore Rebbe Lezer argues, how can they marry each other? How can you have anybody that's a doubt marrying anyone who's for sure a mamzer or a suffix mamzer when they could be doing a sin in their marriage? Because if they're not a mamzer, we don't know if they're a mamzer for sure. Maybe they're not. If they're not a mamzer, then how can they marry a mamzer or marry somebody who's possibly a mamzer? So therefore, that's where Rebbe Lezer says that the vada and the vadai, the ones that are certainly, disqualified, we know for sure the mamzerim, we know for sure they're in a sin, then the halacha is they can marry each other. But to marry one who's a doubtful mamzer, to marry a certain mamzer or another doubtful mamzer would be forbidden. The Eilu Ein HaSveikas. And again, the Mishnah tells us when Rebbe Lezer is talking about sveikas, doubtful ones, who are these doubtful ones? Well, two of them we've already been talking about because we know about them. Shasuki Asufi, the child who we don't know who the father is or we don't know who the parents are. They are the doubtful ones. They cannot marry a mamzer or a doubtful mamzer. And now we're introduced to a new one, the chusi, and a kusi. A kuthian is also considered a questionable mamzer. What's the story with the kusim? Some read to you here from the notes. The Kuthians were a pagan group who settled in Eretz Yisrael during the first Beis Hamikdash era. When they were attacked by lions, they converted to Judaism in the hope of being saved. However, even after their conversion, they kept some pagan beliefs and did not observe the mitzvahs properly. Since they did not properly, now some of them, actually, I think the Gemara says, ones that they did observe properly, they observed very well. But there's certain ones that they didn't observe properly. And one of those things that they did not observe properly were marriage and divorce. Since they did not properly observe the laws of marriage and divorce, it often happened that one of them would marry a woman who was still married to someone else. For example, she was not divorced properly from her husband, and any children from that union would be mamzerim. Therefore, the sages ruled that they must also be treated as possible mamzerim. They must all be treated as possible mamzerim, and ordinary Jews are forbidden to marry them. So therefore, the Mishnah lists Kusi as one of the doubtful ones, because since they were not careful with certain mitzvahs, one of those mitzvahs they were not careful with was marriage and divorce. So maybe they facilitated a divorce that was not kosher. The woman is still married, and her children from the next husband are mamzerim. So because of that concern, the sages declared Kusim have to be considered Safek mamzerim. If they're Safek mamzerim, then they cannot marry another Safek mamzer, which would theoretically mean that they really shouldn't be able to marry each other. Not that I don't know if they had the power to stop them from doing it, but they couldn't marry a mamzer or a shisuki or a nasufi. That were also doubtful. Mamzerim. The Bartanura writes at the end that nowadays, meaning if nowadays you knew someone was a kusi, asoim kanachim gemurim l'chol divrayim. They were later made by the sages. They were considered goyim. Goyim. They were not even considered Jews. And therefore, there is no issue with them being Safek mamzerim or anything like that, because they're not considered Jewish. They're not held as Jews. What the exact trying to remember what the Gemara says about that. Why did they decree upon them that they are not Jews? I don't remember exactly. Don't remember. Have a wonderful day, wonderful Shabbos.
Thank you, Rabbi. So